Everybody, welcome to the first official ElfQuest panel at a SacCon. Right? We're really honored to have Wendy and Richard joining us at this one. I wanted to start off, because I'm technically the moderator, which I've never been.
And we're not going to make it easy.
No, it's going to be awesome. So I was going to start out by telling my story of how I came to find ElfQuest. I wasn't even in high school yet. I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with some neighborhood pals who, you know, since we like D&D and Champions and role-playing games, they like comics as well. And one of them had the first two collections. This is way back in the early 80s, so the first series had not even completed yet. But the first two collections were books 1 through 5 and 6 through 10, I
That's
believe.
right.
And that is what I read and fell in love with. I had already read some Spider-Man and Star Wars and superhero comics, but this was my real first introduction into fantasy and these beautifully drawn elves in this lush scenery with this incredibly detailed story of romance and adventure, and it blew me away. And I immediately started buying the original series as it was coming out, and I was hooked. I was a fan. I had aspirations to draw comic books, which I eventually got to do with a small company here out of Sacramento called Silverwolf Comics, where a few other creators got their start. And then I drew some Chucky and Child's Play comics. I went to college, studied animation, and actually got an interview with Bruce Timm to work on the original Batman animated series. I did not get that job, it worked out great. And here's why: because I believe 1.5 to 2 years later, a writer I worked with on the Child's Play comics named Andy Mangles got to work with Wendy and Richard, and he recommended me to them to draw a story in a New Blood summer special.
Yes.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And that kicked off an amazing run with these guys, helping them tell the story of the elves. And then I later got a job on Batman Beyond, and my career shifted more towards animation than comics. But most of my comics career is thanks to these two incredible people, sitting next to me.
You just now told the story about Bruce Timm and the whole thing, and how
Right.
you didn't get that job.
Right.
Well, if we'd known it, you'd flunked out with Bruce Timm.
Right? Oh, you're a reject. No, it was fate. It was meant to be that I wasn't meant to go into animation yet. I had some stories to tell with the Pinis on ElfQuest. So
Well, Brandon did almost the entire Shards series. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Shards. Shards is one of our favorite sections of ElfQuest. We call it our video game section,
Right.
because really, think about it. They have to get up this mountain, and they have all these levels they have to level up to. So it was,
and the trials get worse and worse. And then they finally, the top guy is the boss, right?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
the boss thing.
Yep.
The Rommel John.
Yep.
And
they don't even get to kill him.
No.
no, they come close.
Yeah.
I do want to do a public service announcement right now. I mean, half of you raised your hands and said you're new to ElfQuest. And maybe at some point, if we have time, some of you will say, how is it that you're here at an ElfQuest panel? But if you are new and you're looking to get started reading, I just want to make a plug for the ElfQuest website, which is elfquest.com. It's real easy to remember. Up at the top, there's a button called Read. You go there, and you got the first 35 years of ElfQuest uploaded, scanned for free. So if you're starting at the beginning, go there, bring a lunch, because you'll be a while, and just immerse yourself in the story.
What was it like, kind of like working indie as a comic? Was like that like a really difficult process? Did you find what were sort of like the ups and downs of indie publishing? Because I want to publish my own books. So.
Okay, now it's different these days, and I'm going to start this answer because I can't draw worth beans.
Same.
But I handled the business and all that stuff. When I said we took it to Marvel and DC, they didn't want it. It's not strictly true that we started it ourselves. We did find a small publisher out of Michigan who was willing to take ElfQuest on. And Wendy drew the first 2 issues. We sent the artwork to this guy. He did publish the first issue, which is Fantasy Quarterly, #1 and only. And then we tried to get paid.
Ooh.
And then we tried to get her artwork back.
Oh.
And neither one of those was happening.
Oh.
And there was no email, this is 1977. So I was trying to call long distance, no answer, no reply.
Picking up the phone.
And one day I said, we were living near Boston at the time. I said to her, it was a Saturday. It was just, we got up Saturday morning, and I said, I'm going to the airport, I'm going to Michigan. Just like that. And like the round trip was $29 in those days.
Yes.
Yes. So I I flew into Detroit, I rented a car, I went up to this guy's house, there was nobody home, I sat on the doorstep for 2 or 3 hours until he came home and saw me there. The expression was almost worth the trip. But we went inside and we had a conversation. I'm doing my best Godfather right now. And I came back with her artwork. We still hadn't gotten paid, but 2 distributors of comics in those early days took the print run of Fantasy Quarterly #1, got it distributed to comic shops. It sold out. They paid us. And that was the seed of us doing it ourselves. So, that's indie comics ups and downs then. Indie comics ups and downs now, you have things a lot easier if you want them because the internet. You can put up a website, you can do stuff, you can digitize it, you can there are so many avenues available.
You also have social media on which you can promote your work and get eyeballs on it because that's what you want. But it's still tough because you can get your first issue out. The real trick is, can you get your second issue out? And can you monetize it?
Yeah. I mean, whether it's a comic book or a web comic, you have to be on a schedule that you meet, whether it's a weekly or a monthly. If people come to expect it next Tuesday, you'd better have it available next Tuesday. I can't begin to say how to do that because that's not my job. We have a guy doing that kind of thing for us because we're kind of busy just making the things. But it's all out there for you to find, for you to learn, for you to talk to people, for you to get pointers from people who are already doing it.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
I read I was going through the first page of the cover book. Beautiful book, by the way. Beautiful art. Amazing. And it did mention I'll get a little closer. It did mention the rocky start with the publicators. You guys were going up against Marvel Comics, DC Comics, all these guys. And you guys mentioned that it was difficult to get started with the first issue and second issue and all that stuff. So at that point, it becomes a product of love, right? You have to be motivated to keep it going. I'm curious, what was that motivator for you guys?
Oh, the motivation was that it took off instantly. We had to run to catch up with it. It's called catching lightning in a bottle. The first run that we did of ElfQuest just sold out immediately. So we doubled that for the second issue, and we just had to keep doubling it. We were incredibly, incredibly lucky. And, Marvel and DC kind of sat back and said, what's this? What's going on? But we didn't think much about competition at the time. What we thought about was all of a sudden we had deadlines in our lives we'd never had to meet before. We had schedules. He was teaching himself how to be a publisher. So it was not tough to sell ElfQuest. The timing was right. There was room for it on the shelves. And one of the things that we're proudest of is we were hauling in a huge female audience at the time. Women were finding it, and at the time, women were much more fantasy readers than guys were. And so ElfQuest kind of skewed toward a female audience. And the comics industry was rather amazed by that too. They were like, what is this thing doing? So we didn't experience the toughness of competition. We experienced the toughness of just having to keep up with the demands that were being made of us.
We didn't know, as Wendy just said. First of all, there wasn't really a lot of competition in the independent market because there were 2 or 3 comics, and that was it. Of course, Marvel and DC and Archie were the mainstream comics, but we weren't competing with them. It didn't even make sense to think about. We just wanted to get the story out and not go broke in the process. That the first issue sold out of a 10,000 print run like that.
Well, we were idiots. We did
everything wrong.
We did everything wrong.
It worked out, okay, but you know.
We didn't know what
So
was
if you want to do this, just do everything wrong.
Right. It'll work out.
But the thing was, what we did know was that at that time in the mid to late 1970s, the first issue of an independent comic or a fanzine could sell 200, 500 copies. We sold 10,000. And we thought, holy crap, that's... so
I have a quick question about that.
Yeah.
Where were they sold? Back in 78, were there comic shops? Because you weren't able to sell at a grocery store or newsstand.
there were some comic shops.
Yeah.
The direct market was growing. The direct market started a few years before, so there were some comic shops, but a lot of those fantasy quarterlies were sold in head shops. Because head shops were where underground comics were sold, and the undergrounds were edgy, but it was an avenue of distribution all the same.
So thanks to the hippies, ElfQuest.
Yes,
You know?
Thanks to
the
the
hippies and the
Stones.
stoners. The fact that the first issue sold out that well, and to get started, I had borrowed $2,000 from my parents, and I knew that they felt we're never going to see that money again. And I paid them back a month later, and that expression was worth it.
Right?
But then we just kept plowing the money back in and doing it. But as Wendy has said, we knew ElfQuest was onto something good, but neither one of us were used to the schedule, the structure of making comics. Now, in those early days, ElfQuest came out once every 4 months. And that's in large part because the artwork was just so spectacularly detailed and wonderful that there was no way we were going to do a monthly comic. So it came out and people waited and waited and waited, and they bought it more and more. So the difficulties we faced were, okay, we're coming up on a deadline. She's working her butt off. I'm worried about the printer wanting, stuff, and just navigating those waters between the two of us, as well as between us and the business world. The model is very different now because, again, there's the internet, there's monetization, I'm so old school. I'm living back in 1980 in terms of business models. That's why Warp Graphics still owns ElfQuest, but Dark Horse Comics is publishing ElfQuest because they have the machinery in place to do that. My head would explode if I had to do that.
So,
Well, yeah, I want to thank you all for the determination that it took. I know when I was talking about a rocky start, it's like you guys were suffering from success, right? You guys were having to learn a lot of like new things, and that determination, I think, goes a long way. And being able to learn from mistakes, it's just, very special people to make that happen.
Plus, you just reminded me of something. When Wendy told me this story, it was a big sprawling story that was going to cover 12, 15 issues in chapters, and to fall down on something like that in the middle, neither one of us really ever wanted to face the idea of not finishing this race. So that was itself a motivation.
yes.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
I guess what character did you guys first come up with, and why?
Well, I'll start.
You
Then
start.
Okay. ElfQuest comes from in here. I've been telling stories since I was about that high from the
And
table.
that's off the table, yeah.
Yes, from the table.
big.
And they're always the same story. It's always about misfits who don't belong, who are persecuted and are looking for where they really belong and who their people really are. And I've told stories like that throughout my life. And so in the mid-'70s, I sat Richard down and I told him this idea I had, because in the mid-'70s, my goodness, Star Wars came out, Lord of the Rings was enjoying another surge of popularity. It came in cycles, and Ralph Bakshi did his Lord of the Rings movie, and we just had this feeling that the time was right to bring out a big epic fantasy story. We didn't know exactly how we were going to do it. We started with the idea of maybe it would be a prose novelization, and then we thought, well, maybe we could write it as a movie script and try to pitch it around. But ultimately, we landed on the idea of a comic, because then we could combine the words and the pictures.
Will Eisner, I don't know how many of you know that name, but Will Eisner is one of the giants in the history of comics, said that the comics medium, format, whatever, is the perfect melding of words and pictures to tell a story. And as Wendy said, we first thought about, writing it as prose. But you see, as prose, you wouldn't get to see her art. Now, we met in 1969, so some years prior to ElfQuest, and I had been exposed for years and years to the richness of her art. So any expression of ElfQuest was going to have art in it. We were both fans of comics. We both grew up from our early teens, and we both were fans of Marvel Comics more than DC Comics, because Marvel Comics had that essence of family. The Fantastic Four was a family. The Avengers was a family. They bickered. They had triumphs and failures. And that was something that appealed to both of us. So comics turned out to be the way to go. There was only one snag. I had no idea how to make comics or how to print comics or how to market comics. We took ElfQuest to Marvel and DC because I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to cash the checks they sent us. That part has not changed in 50 years. They both said, it's a little too peculiar. We took it to a couple of alternative comics. They were nice about it, but they said, no, not really. So then, essentially, we ended up doing it ourselves. and we both learned a lot about the business of comics in doing that. But I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. What made ElfQuest lightning in a bottle was her artwork. From the very, very first, I mean, so many of you have come up to our table and said, I saw the cover and it just face hugged me and wouldn't let go. I'm going to tell a story about Sonny.
Oh, yes.
Sonny Strait. If you know ElfQuest, you know that he has done artwork for us. If you know anime, if you know Dragon Ball Z, you know that he is a voice character. He does Krillin for Dragon Ball Z. What's the One Piece character?
Oh, One Piece God, Usopp.
Usopp. All that screaming, that's him. And he worked for us, the same as Brandon worked for us. But Brandon doesn't scream anywhere near as much.
No.
Sonny was introduced to ElfQuest. Again, it was a friend's house, and there were comics on the floor. And he picked up this one. And for those of you who know ElfQuest, there's a sequence where Winnowill is taunting Cutter inside Blue Mountain, and Cutter just has enough. He snaps, he turns on his heel, and he tackles her, and he's got his sword, New Moon, at Winnowill's throat. And as Sonny tells it, he looked at that. It was so violent, so expressive, so everything, and his first thought was, this is wonderful. Who's the dude that draws this? And somebody said, and he turned to the beginning of the credits and discovered that the dude's name was Wendy. So again, it's the strength of the artwork. It combines the sensibility of manga and anime from the East, the beautiful proportions, and the power, and I will even go so far as to say brutality of superhero comics, the weight and everything else, and nobody else does it like that.
100%. Yeah.
Back to you.
Yeah.
Did you get your answer?
I did.
Good.
Was Winnowill based on any particular mythological figure? And then beyond that, if it's just a no, are there real life inspirations for story arcs and characters?
Are you familiar with the
Microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
Are
intimate.
you familiar
just
with the Jungian archetype of the shadow?
No.
Okay. You got to get into Jung.
I've been trying to get into the union.
But Winnowill is an archetypal bad girl character that goes way, way back. We have bad goddesses, we have bad fairies, we have, everybody kind of recognizes her. They know who she is, and
They've seen her in one iteration or another,
yes.
right? Yeah.
My particular beloved bad girl is Maleficent. And so in some ways, Winnowill is kind of a tribute to Maleficent in that she's very elegant and the black clothing and the hair. But she comes from a place also that you may not realize. She is also patterned after a kabuki lion dancer. Oh. That's the hair and the flowing kimono-like robes. And so if you notice her, whenever you see her in full figure, she's always standing in an S curve. Because in kabuki, the characters do those amazing poses, And we like to call that the line of beauty, the S curve, and she's like the epitome of that. So Winnowill is the shadow. She's the dark goddess. You know who she is. You knew her the minute you saw her. She's your best friend. she's
in the back.
We all have her inside us, because inside us we're both male and female, and
light and dark.
And light and dark, and she is the shadow. She is the deceiver, the trickster, the manipulator, the one who gets what she wants through lies and deception. All of that darkness. That's what she That's what she's made of.
The one thing that she is not is a villain. Because ElfQuest is not good versus evil. It's not that simplistic binary. None of the, quote, good guys are all good. They have their shadow sides. None of the, quote, bad guys are all bad. They have their light sides. So Winnowill, like everybody in ElfQuest, like everybody in life, Winnowill, as they say, is the hero of her own story.
Yeah.
And she has perfectly reasonable to her motivations for doing the things that she does. You may not agree with them, but that's where conflict comes from.
The best villains, the best foes for the hero, always want the same thing the hero wants. What does Winnowill want? She wants her race united. She wants her race to be pure and to go home where they came from originally. And so she wants the same thing Cutter wants. Cutter wants to unite the scattered tribes so that they will be stronger together than apart. But I want to turn the question to Brandon, my dear, because
Right?
in the Shards storyline, you got to work with Winnowill like nobody else ever got to work with her. And he worked with her in her human aspect as Lady Winnowill, and then also in her elfin aspect. And
I got to write her for a little bit.
you got to write her.
One of the awesome things after Shards happened, Wendy and Richard let me take over the Rogue's Curse storyline, which, if you're familiar, is after Lady Winnowill meets her demise at the end of Shards, her spirit is free to screw up the world of Two Moons if it weren't for Rayek, who absorbs her essence into his mind. And he is now tortured with this elf, this, shadow person that he loves and is not the nicest person in the world, and he's struggling to keep the world safe from her and show her love. And I didn't delve far enough into that relationship, and I'm curious to find out more about it.
There's more.
Right, but getting to draw Winnowill as a human, occasionally turning into an elf, but I still tried to keep that grace, that line of beauty, that essence of her, even though she didn't look like the tall, beautiful elf. She still had long hair. It was mostly tied up. And
Well, as artists exploring human beauty versus elfin beauty,
Yeah.
we had a big conversation about that today, because elfin beauty is ambiguous. It's all genders. It's
And strong cheekbones.
and well, you would know about cheekbones, wouldn't you?
Right.
We noticed.
Thank you.
Are you going to cosplay Winnowill?
Well, I would love to. I was supposed to be 5'8". I don't know what happened. I did something naughty as a kid, and just
Okay.
now I'm short. But otherwise,
Okay.
Yeah, but you're the right size for her.
Yes.
because
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not,
However she
she's
looks in the-
not that tall.
She's 5 foot tall.
No, actually, so I dream of voice acting her.
Aha.
Yeah,
You could do that.
Yes, you could.
I sure could. Let me tell you. Thank you for
Smooth
letting me participate.
as silk. But I think you should consider cosplaying her too. But anyway, yeah, elfin beauty is has I like to call it a just kind of a painful prettiness. It's it's like they're so beautiful you want to punch them. and it's tough for an artist to capture that, because it goes beyond humanity. It goes into the area of the archetypal and the ideal, like a mask almost. And so it was,
ElfQuest,
you did an awfully good job of capturing it. But it's tough, isn't it?
It's not easy. It's not easy. But, I was a lot younger. We're talking almost 30 years ago. So I was.
See now, and how many of you know the Harley Quinn show?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Now, Harley, if you look at Harley, she's got elfin proportions and an elfin face. She's got those great big slanted elfin eyes and that big grin and a really symmetrical face.
Mm-hmm.
So, and was it working on ElfQuest that helped you draw Harley?
Yes, for sure. No, without a doubt. And what I was going to say was, being so young in my artistic career, it helped working with Wendy, getting notes and feedback and mentoring, from this, professional on how to tell a story better, how to draw the elves more like the fantastic creatures they are. I learned a ton that carried me into my further career in comics and then in animation for sure. And learning to, when I grew up, I was trying to draw superheroes and human realistic proportions. So drawing ElfQuest broke me of that a little bit.
Because it's caricature almost.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And
Yeah.
it's cartooning in a way too.
That is a fair term.
Right?
Yes.
And so that kind of expanded and helped me learn to adapt to different styles. That helped me out in animation. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience early in my artistic
So you
career.
guys just heard something. You guys just heard something that almost no other audience hears when you go to a panel about comics, because panels about comics are usually who's stronger, the Hulk or Thor. Who else?
ElfQuest delves into some deep stuff.
Yes.
Deep and relatable, if I may.
And the whole thing about archetypes, yes, archetypes abound in other comics, but I don't think there's a comic that goes as deep into this. The Jungian archetypes and so on, and they're just so full of energy and conflict and everything.
Also, the hero's journey.
In the hero's journey.
Yeah,
but
ElfQuest.
that's why
The entire quest, if any of you have read the entire quest, it absolutely follows all the stages of the hero's journey, even to the very end of the
You should
hero's
sell
life.
a homeschool curriculum. I'm not even joking. The hero's journey.
Yeah.
But that's why we call ElfQuest the Jung and the Restless.
If you could pick an animation studio to do an ElfQuest,
Stop. I'll start, you finish. The one question we dread, because we know we will get it at every panel we do, is when is there going to be an ElfQuest movie? All right. Many of you who have been with us for a long time know that this has been a quest for a long time, is ElfQuest, the animated film or TV series. And we have been on many different paths towards that. ElfQuest has been optioned many, many times by many different studios. And the one thing that always kept us, we'd go right up to the altar, but we'd never quite get married. The one thing that always stopped that was that the studio that optioned it didn't get it. They would always say, all right, who's the villain? All right, who's the bad guy? And who do the elves have to fight? Where's Sauron? They kept wanting to turn ElfQuest into Lord of the Rings. And we couldn't allow that. As nice as the money was, as nice as the opportunities were, because we hooked up with some really powerful folks over the years, we just would rather have no ElfQuest movie than a bad ElfQuest movie. So take it from here.
And she's 100% correct, because it's been up and down emotionally over the years. We get approached by a big studio. We want to make a movie. Oh, yeah, we'd love to see that. And then it falls through. And you bounce. We have learned over a long time how to distinguish between something that we want and something that we feel we need. For a while, in the beginning, we felt ElfQuest needed a movie sort of to justify its existence, to validate it. We have learned, and our lives are a lot calmer now. We would love it. You would certainly love it. We don't need it in order to feel that we have succeeded.
Right.
And that's an important distinction. Now,
I love that.
as Wendy said,
That said,
studios would come, they'd pay us money, they'd screw it up. Most recently, how many of you have seen the movie, well, there's two of them now, but the first one, Into the Spider-Verse? What'd you think of it? It was pretty spectacular. And the animation of it was like nothing anybody had seen before.
it deserved its Oscar.
It deserved its Oscar. 2-3 years ago, I got an email from somebody whose name I did not know, but I will always take a meeting. They wanted to talk about ElfQuest. So I drove down to,
Culver City.
we were in California at the time, drove down to take this meeting. It is the writer and the director of Into the Spider-Verse. And that team wanted to do not a movie, but a series. Because you cannot put ElfQuest into a 90-minute, 120-minute movie. It just cannot be shoehorned like that. But a series gives you a chance to, chapterize it and develop it and so on and so forth. About a year and a half ago, we signed another option, and the money was nice, with Fox Animation. They've been doing, they do The Simpsons, and that's been going 30 years. They know something about this. Our team is the Spider-Verse team. The animation studio that they are connected with doing is called Bento Box, which probably more of you know more about, and certainly Wendy knows more than I do, but if she's okay with it, I'm fine with it.
I'm a Has-Been Hotel fan.
Me too. I love Has Been Hotel.
You asked the question, what would we choose? Now, that's a different question, and I don't even know. Back in the early days, we thought ElfQuest would be a wonderful cell 2D animation
24
movie,
frames per
24 frames per second, something like Disney's Sleeping Beauty, which is a gorgeously animated film. But that's not an option anymore. Wendy likes Bento Box. I like it because Wendy likes it. But they're going to bring, if it happens, and I have to say this, big if, because it's not, I have learned it ain't real till you're all sitting in your chair with popcorn watching it. But if that comes to pass, it's a culmination of everything that we've put into ElfQuest.
Because when I think of, I remember because I started reading ElfQuest and I'm like, this feels very, I don't know if you know the guy, but Hayao Miyazaki in Studio Ghibli. It feels very Studio Ghibli because again, you mentioned that there's no villain. There's
we came first.
You did come first. Yeah, you did. So I was like, I'd like to see an ElfQuest Studio Ghibli movie.
No, I'll tell you why.
Why?
I'll tell you why. Because Hayao Miyazaki is Studio Ghibli.
Yeah.
He lives, breathes, eats, and sleeps it. And everything that comes out of it is his vision.
Yeah.
And he would take ElfQuest and he would make it all look like
He wouldn't be interested.
his way of drawing.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be interested in ElfQuest.
No.
Yeah.
Because that's not. But these Spider-Verse people, and how we know that they're good, whereas everybody else who tried to turn it into, good guys, bad guys, simplistic. Over the last year or so, they have been corresponding with us, largely with Wendy, and they have been asking questions,
Really smart ones.
really smart questions that demonstrate they know what ElfQuest is all about, and they want to bring that sensibility to an ElfQuest series. So there you go.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's
Great.
Now you know.
Yeah, and again, awesome. I'm glad you're a has-been fan. That's a great series.
Oh, that's great.
I want to kind of touch into there's a section there for products, right? So stands and Flesk publications who, do a lot of things. Redbubble does more like the T-shirts and things like that. But they've been kind of revamping their website and doing product placement. Is there any update? Are you guys working with them? And
Here's the thing. We licenses with half a dozen people, and you mentioned stands. They're doing the challenge coins. We love them. They've got control. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Redbubble is a print on demand for T-shirts and some other things, stickers and phone cases. We made the decision to temporarily shut that down because it was just getting overloaded. We want to bring it back. I want to bring it back. And you mentioned they're revamping. So I need to learn about that and find out. So there's no real update other than to say, yeah, it's something we want to do because a lot of people bought stuff, obviously, and we would like to make that available again. I just want to get a little bit more efficient about it. It's easy when you own a property, and ElfQuest is an intellectual property. We own it. We have always owned it, even though Marvel and DC and Dark Horse have licenses. We still own it. It is very easy when you own something. Oh, let's do this. Let's do that. You dilute it. It becomes a glut. It becomes cheap. And the one thing that I will never allow ElfQuest to become or even look like is cheap. But people do want to wear ElfQuest. And we want to provide that. So the answer is basically yes, it's going to come back.
okay, thank you.
What was your favorite fantasy story outside of ElfQuest? What was your favorite fantasy?
Whatever was being reported in the Washington Post at the time. We're living in some really crazy fantasy times. Right?
Oh, we are.
I was not personally, when I was younger, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, into fantasy so much. I was into science fiction. And so I read authors like Keith Laumer, I read Ted Sturgeon, I read Asimov, Clarke, all those. What did you?
Oh, I grew up on great old fairy tales, the Lang's fairy tale books, mythology. I loved mythology of all kinds, from all cultures, Japanese, Greek, and that's when I was a child. I discovered comics when I was a tween, and I also discovered the writings of Michael Moorcock, who created the Elric character. And I got so fascinated with that particular fantasy that I wrote to Mr. Moorcock and I said, "Ooh, I want to illustrate Stormbringer." And he, believe it or not, he wrote back, and we formed a correspondence. And so I worked on that for a long, long time. So when Richard and I met, I was still working on Stormbringer.
Yeah. Now, you haven't asked this, but a lot of people do. What fantasy do you like to read now? And I say this, I think Wendy pretty much agrees. We work there. We don't vacation there.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first fantasy I was exposed to was ElfQuest.
That's amazing.
Because I can't think of anything beyond that. From there, I went, oh, there's other fantasy, Lord of the Rings, duh, and I eventually got into Michael Moorcock, the Elric of Melniboné. Is that?
Melniboné.
Okay, I said it
Yes.
right. Nice. and found out, what the whole wide fantasy world was, but the heart. There's nothing as the heart like ElfQuest did. Yeah.
I'm really enjoying ElfQuest so far. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got it. Great
Keep
question.
on going.
It was good to hear about the Yukian piece with Winnowill and thinking about archetypes. And so it was a pretty wild ride in the final quest with like the shared consciousness of Timain and Cutter. I was trying to explain it to my partner who is behind me and doesn't really read ElfQuest.
Well, Cutter is, we each have our avatar, and Skywise is Richard, and Cutter is my avatar.
Yeah.
So he had to be both male and female.
Yeah. And I was just curious to hear a little bit about the process of that, that storyline coming about, how that was like shared between you two, how
Go back and read the series. We planted clues through the whole thing.
So you always knew that was going to be part of the story. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going to go back and read certain scenes and take it in once you know Final Quest, you're going to go, oh, I get it now.
So back in the 70s, you discussed that idea when you were kicking off the series?
In the 70s, material from the 80s on.
Yeah. Okay.
Is when we really started planting the clues. However, when they first encountered Timain in the palace, the very first time she's wearing the wolf skin and everything, go back and read it. Okay.
People sometimes ask us, are you making this up as we go along? And we say, no. We have known the basic skeleton of this body from the beginning. Actually, she has had this living in there from the beginning. Now, we like to say, if you're making a road trip from Boston to Los Angeles, you're leaving Boston, you got to get to Los Angeles, but along the way, you can make side trips and sightsee all you want. And a lot of ElfQuest has been those side trips.
Which you've drawn.
And some of them, which Brandon has certainly drawn, some of which we weren't planning at the time because they're not on that direct backbone line. But knowing where you end up is it's a necessity for telling a story as long and complicated and as ElfQuest.
Yes.
And over those years, Wendy would plant clues. So you read Final Quest where this happens, and you realize there was a tip of the hat to it in Siege at Blue Mountain 30 years earlier.
Wow.
So no, we're not. We're making up the side trips as we go along, maybe, but the basis of it, that's been there from the beginning.
As storytellers, I think one of the things we feel most important is that the story has to have a feeling of inevitability. I think that a lot of storytelling nowadays is weak or unsatisfying because you sit through a 2-hour movie or you read a whole comic series and it doesn't seem to resolve itself. It's like it sort of leaves you hanging like, well, there's this plot hole here. And, we have our thoughts about today's storytelling. But for us, nothing is more important than making sure that as we take you on the journey with us, you're going to get to the end and you're going to feel that it couldn't have ended any other way.
See, this is snarky, but if you know anything about me, I don't have a problem being snarky. And I have said this in public before, and I will say it again. If we, Wendy, didn't know where ElfQuest was going and where it was going to end up, we'd be lost. Think about what I just said.
Oh.
How many of you watched Lost?
You bad boy. Bad boy.
Ouch.
Yeah, because Lost was the first major disappointment. The next one was Game of Thrones. because you don't do that to an audience. You don't get them devoted to you for 8 years and just, I mean, please.
Which turned out to be another motivating factor. We knew that this thing had a conclusion. And there were times when we wondered, when the winds and the stars didn't quite align, are we going to be able to see this thing through to the end? Because there have been upheavals in publishing, there have been upheavals in comics distribution, and so on and so forth. But the urge to get this thing nailed down once and for all was so strong that we would have found a way to get it out there to you, no matter what.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I'll take up the mantle as moderator again and bring this thing in for a landing. You guys in 2028, that will be the 50th anniversary of ElfQuest, the first issue being published. For two creators to bring this to life and see it through for 5 decades is a remarkable achievement. And to come up on stage and answer all your questions and give such an entertaining panel is a rare treat too. And thank you all for coming. And let's end by giving a big hand to Wendy and Richard Pini, the creators of ElfQuest. All right. Awesome. Thanks, you guys.